Looking for magic cards? At flipsidegaming.com you can now use the promo code LVD to get a 10% discount on orders over $10 while supporting the channel at the same time. Hello and welcome to another episode of Friendly Friday, a weekly series where we take a look at budget, standard or modern decks, and this week we're taking a look at a modern deck that I like to call TorpOrzhov, which is the amalgamation of Torpor Orb and Orzhov, which is the black-white guild in Magic, and indeed this deck is built around the card Torpor Orb, which is a 2-mana artifact that reads, creatures entering the battlefield don't cause abilities to trigger, and in the deck we have a total of 11 cards with the same effect. We have 4 copies of Torpor Orb, we have 4 copies of Honor Guard, which is a 2-mana 1/3 creature with the same text, and 3 copies of Hushwing Gryff, which is a 3-mana 2/2 with Flash and Flying that also has the same ability. So why are we playing all these cards? Well, in Magic all enter the battlefield abilities are not created equal. In fact, some enter the battlefield abilities are not even beneficial for you. If you look at a card like Eater of Days, you get a 4-mana 9/8 with Flying and Trample, but it does have a big downside, which is when it enters the battlefield, you have to skip your next 2 turns. But if you have a Torpor Orb effect in play, you can ignore the drawback and you're left with a 4-mana 9/8 with Flying and Trample, which is quite a deal. So that's the premise behind the deck. We're playing a bunch of Torpor Orb effects and then a bunch of powerful creatures with negative enter the battlefield abilities. So let's take a look at the entire list, starting out with our 1-drops, where we have some cards that can interact with the opponent to make sure that we're not dead by the time we're deploying our sweet creatures. We have 4 copies of Fatal Push to take out opposing creatures, and we have Field of Ruin to enable Revolt for us. And we have 4 copies of Inquisition of Kozilek to take non-land cards from the opponent's hand with converted mana cost 3 or less. Then we have our 4 copies of Torpor Orb, along with our 4 Honor Guards in the 2-drop slot. And we also have 4 copies of Night's Whisper, which for 2 life lets us draw 2 cards, so ensures that we keep hitting land drops since we do want to get up to 4 and find our different combo pieces. Then we have 4 copies of Hunted Horror, the cheapest of the payoff cards, a 2-mana 7/7 with Trample, with the negative enter the battlefield ability of giving the opponent 2 3/3 green centaur creature tokens with protection from black. Then we have our 3 copies of Hushwing Gryff, putting the total of Torpor Orb effects up to 11, could even go up to 12, but I think 11 is a good number. Then we have 4 copies of Eater of Days, the most powerful of the payoff cards, but arguably also the most devastating drawback. Then we have 4 copies of Dust Elemental, a 4-mana 6/6 with Flash, Flying and Fear, so can't be blocked except by flying artifacts or flying black creatures from the opponent, and has the negative enter the battlefield ability of having to return 3 creatures we control to their owner's hands, which of course we don't want to do. And then last but not least, we also have 1 copy of Inverter of Truth as a 4-mana 6/6 with Devoid and Flying, and when the Inverter of Truth enters the battlefield, we have to exile all the cards from our library, face down, and then shuffle all cards from our graveyard back into our library. So for low on cards in our graveyard, this thing is going to kill us pretty quickly if we don't have a Torpor Orb effect in play. Then taking a quick look at our mana base, we have 4 copies of Temple of Silence, which enters the battlefield tapped, but lets us scry 1, so helps us dig for the missing combo pieces. We also have 2 copies of Shambling Vent, which can turn into a 2/3 life-linking creature. We have 4 copies of Fetid Heath, which helps us filter our mana, so is very valuable for casting Dust Elemental, which is otherwise a bit challenging to cast with double white in its mana cost. We also have 4 copies of Field of Ruin, which helps us destroy non-basic lands from the opponent while searching a basic ourselves, so can also fix our mana in a way, and also enables Revolt for Fatal Push, which is quite relevant. Then 1 Isolated Chapel, which enters the battlefield untapped if we control a Plains or a Swamp, and to go with it we have 2 copies of Plains and 6 Swamps. We want a lot of untapped black sources to be able to cast Fatal Push and Inquisition early on. Ideally we would have more fetch lands and shock lands to support the early untapped black mana, but since we're on a budget we're just playing all these lands. And then last but not least, we have 1 copy of Vault of the Archangel, which can give our creatures lifelink and death touch until end of turn, which is very synergistic with our trampling creatures, because trample plus death touch is quite a combo. You just need to assign 1 damage to any blocking creature, and then the rest can trample over. And of course, lifelink combined with our giant creatures can gain us a ton of life back, which is very valuable against aggro decks. Would like to fit in more copies of Vault, but otherwise the mana base gets a little wonky. Then taking a look at our sideboard cards, we have 2 copies of a Relic of Progenitus to find graveyard decks, 3 copies of Duress against combo and control decks, can also side it in against burn decks, Then 2 copies of Stony Silence against any artifact-based decks. 3 copies of Moment of Craving as a cheap removal spell that can also gain us some life back. Then 2 copies of Flaying Tendrils to deal with go-wide creature decks, also exiles them, so very nice against recursive threats like Bloodcast or Flamewake Phoenix, and our Honor Guard with 3 toughness survives the -2/-2, which is also convenient. And then 3 copies of Lingering Souls, which shines in mid-range and control matchups. So that's the deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the draw, and this hand is interesting. We don't have double black yet for all these Hunted Horrors, but we do have Night's Whisper to find a second black source and Torpor Orb, which is difficult to interact with for most opponents. I think I'll keep. And then we can lead with Chapel, maybe play turn 2 Night's Whisper or turn 2 Torpor Orb, turn 1 Mountain into Foundry Street Denizen, so up against a Goblins deck, most likely. Alright, Fatal Push, so this unfortunately comes into play tapped, but that's alright. So next turn we'll have to choose between casting Fatal Push or Torpor Orb, second Mountain into Mog Fanatic, and Legion Loyalists, so our opponent can get in for 4. Already down to 16. Let's untap. Alright, there's a Swamp. So how do we want to sequence things? This turn we could play Torpor Orb, take a beating from the opponent's Goblins, and then next turn we could go Hunted Horror, but then we can't Fatal Push. So the sequencing is a little awkward here, since we can't double spell next turn unless we draw another black source. I think we are better off playing the Torpor Orb here, so we can start unloading these Hunted Horrors as soon as possible. So Torpor Orb would also shut down the Foundry Street Denizen ability, which is quite relevant, so yeah, I think playing Torpor Orb makes sense here. But a Goblin Chieftain is pretty scary, as our opponent hits us for 8 down to 8. So can't afford to take a turn off playing Fatal Push, so we have to play Hunted Horror, and then block, take 6 down to 2, hope they don't have a Bolt, then hope to draw a black source after that. So we can play another Hunted Horror and Fatal Push something. But yeah, we're probably dead here, but we can give it a shot. So that Isolated Chapel not coming into play untapped cost us quite a bit of life in this game. And another Legion Loyalist is just gonna wrap things up here. And we can block the Chieftain, but still take 1,000,000. Unsurprisingly, on the draw, we lose against Goblins, which is a fast aggro deck, so we'll try to address that after Sideboard. Alright, so how did we sideboard? We took out 2 copies of Eater of Days, since our opponent's likely to bring in Shatter effects after seeing Torpor Orb, so the Eater of Days also dies to those. Then Night's Whisper, because we don't want to spend time losing life to draw cards, and then Hushwing Gryff, just because now that we took out a few payoff cards, we maybe don't need as many of the Torpor Orb effects, and we're also bringing in Flaying Tendrils, which would kill our own Hushwing Gryff, along with Moment of Craving as a cheap removal spell, and then 3 copies of Lingering Souls, just to produce some 1/1 blockers to hopefully trade with the opponent's Goblins. We would like to be on the play, and this hand is missing the Torpor Orb effect. We don't have any card selection, but we do have a Moment of Craving to buy us some time, along with the Shambling Vent. I think we can afford to take at least 1 mulligan here, and this hand seems quite good if our opponents can't kill the Honor Guard right away, and even if they can, we have Lingering Souls as a backup plan. Since we're on the play, I don't think we want to keep Inquisition. If we were on the draw, I would consider it, since now that we're on the play, we're not going to have this in our opening hand, and then our curve is going to be all messed up if we want to include Inquisition of Kozilek, so let's bottom that. And then we can lead with Swamp, say go. And next turn run out the Honor Guard, and if it survives we can run out Hunted Horror, which is gonna be a problem for the opponent if they can't go wide. Turn 1 Goblin Guide, so hopefully there's a land on top. There is not, Dust Elemental instead. Alright, that's not the worst, I suppose. So let's untap, and yep, we're pretty much hoping our opponent doesn't have a Lightning Bolt here. Otherwise we lose our blocker and we lose our Torpor Orb effect. And then we're just on the Lingering Souls plan for the time being. And our opponent did have the Lightning Bolt, unfortunately, so we will take 2 more from the guide, which reveals Hushwing Gryff. Alright, at least we have another Torpor Orb effect incoming. So our opponent did miss a land drop. We could just end of turn Hushwing Gryff and then untap, play Hunted Horror, Or we can Lingering Souls, try to block, but then we're giving the opponent more time. So I think we just play Vault, say go, and we want to definitely end of turn the Hushwing Gryff to dodge Goblin Grenade, which I believe is a sorcery. And if our opponent keeps up Lightning Bolt to answer Hushwing Gryff, they're also not really doing much else. Opponent just runs out a 1/1 Bushwhacker. So let's see what the guide reveals. Plains, excellent. So we'll take 2 down to 14. End of turn, run out Hushwing Gryff. And then untap, and then we can choose which payoff card to play. Alright, so Dust Elemental or Hunted Horror. I think we want to go with Dust Elemental just because it's more mana efficient for the turn, and then next turn, if the Hushwing Gryff is still alive, we can go Hunted Horror plus Lingering Souls. Seems like the plan. And then Vault of the Archangel is also going to be big at gaining us life back. And I think attacking with the Gryff is fine since we don't want to lose it in combat if we can avoid it. Even though I'm aware that the opponent can go wide here and deal a lot of damage. But if they miss another land drop, alright, they did find their second land. So now they can do some more stuff. Goblin Grenade can certainly take out Dust Elemental combined with other combat damage. Instead it's just a Goblin Pile Driver. Not the scariest threat given our situation. And our opponent's just gonna stay back. Don't think we need to activate Vault of the Archangel quite yet. So instead we can play Hunted Horror and Lingering Souls, which puts up a nice bit of defense. So let's get in for 8 in the air. And then next turn we should be able to close out the game. Third land, Legion Loyalist. So we can't block with tokens. I guess that's an argument against Lingering Souls. And the Reckless Bushwhacker. But I don't think we're taking 14 here, if we can block the Pile Driver. Since of course the opponent didn't get any benefit from the Bushwhacker entering the battlefield. So our opponent's got a 9 power first striking Pile Driver, which we definitely want to block here. And then we should survive. So we're at 6, and we can attack back for lethal. And Flaying Tendrils is a nice one as well. Let's activate Vault just because. And attack. Alright, on to game 3. Do we want to change anything? Kind of liked our plan there. Do we want to reconsider Hushwing Gryff or either of these? Opponent did not show us any shatter effects, but very possible that they had some in hand. So I think I just run it back here. Alright, this hand seems fine, especially if our Honor Guard survives. Then we have some early disruption, and then Torpor Orb effect into payoff card. So let's keep. Opponent keeps their 6. And turn 1 Legion Loyalist. So now we'll have to decide whether or not we want to play Temple of Silence to enable Honor Guard on 2, or if we want to play Fatal Push on turn 1. And Moment of Craving, nice. So we could just play this removal game, where we Fatal Push into Moment of Craving and slow down the opponent that way. But I kind of want to get this Temple of Silence in play, and maybe dig for another land or another Torpor Orb effect. Yeah, Isolated Chapel is a thing I'm looking for here. So next turn we'll reevaluate, see if we want to start using our removal spells or if we can deploy Honor Guard. Since ideally, if our opponent stepped out, we could go on turn 4 Honor Guard into Hunted Horror, since now we have 4 lands. So Loyalist just gets in for 1, and opponent's passing. Alright, that's good for us, so just gonna play land, say go, don't want to expose the Honor Guard to a Lightning Bolt. Opponent's gonna just bolt our face. So let's see if they have any haste creatures here. They do not. I think we're fine taking one from the Loyalist. If our opponent goes land into Pile Driver, we want a Moment of Craving that instead, I think. So let's just take the 1 for now. And I guess end of turn we just Fatal Push the Loyalist then, since we can keep Moment of Craving to take out a Lord from the opponent, which Fatal Push cannot, unless we have Revolt. So I think we are once again just saying go. Don't want to run out the Honor Guard in face of a Lightning Bolt, and if our opponent taps out next turn we can go Honor Guard plus Hunted Horror. So we take another 3 down to 11. And another Legion Loyalist. So do we take the 1 or do we Moment of Craving think now that our opponent has fired off 2 lightning bolts already, I'm fine using a Moment of Craving here. And alright, our opponent just has to say go. So we get to 1-2 punch our opponent's Honor Guard into Hunted Horror. And now we're in the driver's seat. Opponent does find a second land. We are out of removal spells, so that's a little scary, but the Honor Guard does stop some of the Enter the Battlefield abilities from the opponent. Flaying Tendrils is great here, so let's attack for 8. And then the question is, do we risk playing out another Hunted Horror in the face of a Lightning Bolt on Honor Guard, or do we just pass a turn? Could also play Eater of Days, skip our next 2 turns, but then have a 9-8 on defense potentially. How bad is it giving our opponents those Centaur tokens if the Honor Guard dies? I think we just say go. Don't think we need to run the risk here. Opponent with another bolt, so they did have it. And they're just bolting our face, hoping to Goblin Grenade us out of the game. Goblin Chieftain can get in for 2. So we're down to 8. But we're definitely gonna use Flaying Tendril post-combat. And Inquisition is also nice, so let's attack for 8. And then I think the safest play is to Inquisition plus Flaying Tendrils to maybe take a Goblin Grenade. And our opponent did indeed have Smash to Smithereens, so good sideboard plan, and then Goblin Grenade, which we're gonna take, and then Flaying Tendrils to prevent any outs from our opponents. Say go. So playing Eater of Days would have been a disaster a few turns ago, since our opponent had the bolt for the Honor Guard, and then the Smash to Smithereens for the Eater of Days. So we would have taken a lot of damage and then time walked twice. So glad with our decisions. We'll be back with the next one. Alright, we're on the play, and this hand has 4 Torpor Orb effects, which is quite a lot, and an Inquisition for interaction. So we're missing payoff card, we're missing lands in general, so definitely not a great hand. So I think we probably want to go to 6 here. And alright, this is slightly better. We have 2 payoff cards and a Torpor Orb, so a lot more balanced. 2 lands and Inquisition. And Night's Whisper will keep on top, since that helps us hit land drops. So let's lead with Inquisition, see what's up. Alright, looks like we are up against a Dredge deck. So definitely want to take the Faithless Looting here, which is going to slow down the opponent significantly. They're left with Bloodcast, Golgari Thug, and some lands. There's a Wooded Foothills. And I think we just Night's Whisper here instead of Torpor Orb. If we draw Hunted Horror, playing the Torpor Orb is better here. But I think for general sequencing, playing the Night's Whisper first gives us more information to work with. Alright, the second Torpor Orb and Fatal Push. So we didn't hit any lands here, unfortunately. Opponent is gonna fetch end of turn. They could be on the Hardcast, Bloodcast plan. On turn 3 they do get to flashback Faithless Looting. Alright, our opponent's just passing, interesting. Looks like the opponent wants to discard to hand size to get Thug in the graveyard. So that was their whole plan here. Let's run out Torpor Orb. Although I'm not sure if it's better than just flashing back Faithless Looting on 3. Let's play our 3rd land. Say go. There's no reason to run out a redundant Torpor Orb. Opponent dredged Golgari Thug. Double Bloodcast in the graveyard, that's pretty scary. And a Conflagrate as well. So if we can find a 4th land here on our next turn, I like our chances, as we get to slam down this Eater of Days and follow it up with double Dust Elemental. Opponent Conflagrates us for 3, discarding some more Dredge enablers and another Bloodcast in the graveyard. End of turn, maybe we do want to Fatal Push one of them here, just in case we do find a land. We're gonna run out of 4-drop anyways, so yeah, sure, let's Fatal Push one of them. And alright, perfect, Vault of the Archangel. So let's run out Eater of Days. And there's no Stinkweed Imps in the opponent's graveyard we need to worry about, since those are potentially annoying blockers, as they can even block Dust Elemental. Prize Amalgam in the opponent's graveyard. Opponent gets back 2 Bloodcasts. They don't have haste. Opponent flashes back Looting. Let's pop out the opponent's graveyard here so we can take a better look. So Prize Amalgam comes back end of turn, then they have Conflagrate, which is pretty relevant, and then Life from the Loam, they can start dredging as well. Alright, we picked up a Fatal Push, so let's just get in for 9, and then try to ambush one of the opponent's creatures with the Dust Elemental. Opponent dredges some more, second Prize Amalgam in the graveyard. So lots of cards going into the opponent's graveyard. They only have 19 cards left in their library. And our opponent's just gonna scoop it up. They can't even beat the one Ether of Days. Alright, so we are up against the Dredge, which is where Flaying Tendrils comes in along with a Relic of Progenitus. And then we want to take out Fatal Push, which is not great against Dredge. And I think that's about it. Don't really see any other cards I would want. Duress could be okay, but it's a bit conditional. I think Inquisition is just better. So our opponent probably brought in some form of artifact hate after seeing Torpor Orb and Ether of Days, but that's fine. This hand is certainly a keep. We've got Honor Guard as our Torpor Orb effect, a Night's Whisper to draw us into some more action, and Ether of Days as a payoff card. Alright, Stinkweed Imp in the graveyard is a bit annoying, but Torpor Orb is a nice pickup. So right now our hand pretty much has everything we need, so I think I'm better off not playing the Temple of Silence yet, since I don't know exactly what I'm looking for with the Scry. If the game goes on for a while, maybe that changes and we have a better idea what we're looking for. Opponent gets back Bloodghast. Let's pop out the graveyard once again. 2 mana for perhaps a Cathartic Reunion. Some more cards going to the graveyard. Looks like a Narcomoeba's coming back. Opponent did bring in Nature's Claim. Don't see any Ancient Grudges quite yet. So opponent gets back Narcomoeba. So not a great dredge, to be honest. So on turn 2, what do we do? Opponent's got 5 cards in hand. It's not unreasonable for them to have an Ancient Grudge, so maybe just playing the Honor Guard is better. They don't have a Conflagrate in their graveyard either, and the Honor Guard also just blocks the Bloodghast. So sure, let's run out Honor Guard over Torpor Orb. Although I guess the argument for running out Torpor Orb first is that if our opponent does have Ancient Grudge, we get to know about it, so that we don't need to rely too much on this Ether of Days staying in play. Opponent dredges some more, and casts Faithless Looting, which is gonna dredge as well, putting a Conflagrate, Narcomoeba, Bloodghast in the graveyard. So our opponent's dredge engine is fully operational, but they haven't gotten anything too scary back yet. So just an attack for 1 from Narcomoeba that we can deal with. And Relic of Progenitus is quite nice here, so we get to clean up the opponent's graveyard. So let's play Temple of Silence first. Vault of the Archangel is probably fine, since we don't mind hitting a few more land drops with double Night's Whisper and can make it so we don't lose a race. So let's put that on top, and then run out Relic, and sacrifice it immediately. And our opponent's just gonna concede to this Relic of Progenitus, which is understandable. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the play, and this hand is interesting. We have Inquisition for interaction and Temple of Silence to dig us towards one of our Torpor Orb effects, but 5 lands is a bit much. On the other hand, we do have all our utility lands here, with Vault, Shambling Vent and Temple of Silence, but we can probably do better on 6. So let's go to 6, and yeah, I guess this is a bit better. We're looking for a payoff card here, don't need a second Hushwing Gryff. So let's go Shambling Vent and pass the turn. So we've got all the Torpor Orb effects we need. Now we just need to find lands and payoff cards. Forest into Elvish Mystic up against the Elves deck. And yep, there's Hunted Horror, so I think we just play the Torpor Orb, next turn play the Horror. Could Fatal Push here, but that slows us down as well. So yeah, let's just play the Torpor Orb. And maybe this catches a Dwinnen's Elite or Elvish Visionary, which is quite nice. We don't want to see an Elvish Archdruid here. That would be the worst case scenario. Opponent with Farhaven Elf, but the Torpor Orb prevents the Enter the Battlefield ability from working, and we're just gonna jam this Hunted Horror. Say go. They have access to 4 mana, so potentially Collected Company. Opponent's just gonna pass. Yep, so this looks like a Collected Company is going to happen. So let's attack for 7. I guess we could have forced the issue by casting Fatal Push on Elvish Mystic. But I think I'm just gonna say go. And if our opponent doesn't have the company, we can still Fatal Push in the opponent's upkeep or draw step. Alright, looks like a Chord of Calling instead. A chord for 2. I think we let that happen. See what our opponent gets and then use Fatal Pushes accordingly. Opponent gets Hidden Herbalist. Alright, so just a 2/2. I think we Fatal Push the Mystic here. Probably should have done it end of turn, just in case our opponent has another instant they want to play here. So Elvish Mystic down. Does our opponent have an effect in their draw step? Alright, they don't, so no harm done. Don't really want to Fatal Push the 2/2 here. Alright, their opponent just scoops it up. So Hunted Horror, pretty effective there. So against what looks like an elf deck, although the Herbalist is not an elf. I think we want to bring in Flaying Tendrils, Moment of Craving. Lingering Souls could be okay, but probably not necessary. Opponent did see Torpor Orb, so they might bring in some naturalized type effects. So I could see shaving some Eater of Days. And what else do we want to take out? Probably want to shave some Night's Whispers, although don't want to take out too many. Although I guess on the draw we can afford to take out an additional copy, and then on the play maybe we bring in an additional copy in favor of something else. Don't think we need Duress for Chord of Calling, since we already have Inquisition to take it. And I guess we do miss out on Collected Company, but Inquisition can also take a creature, so this seems fine. And 2 of the 3 creatures our opponent played had Enter the Battlefield abilities, so having Torpor Orb in your opening hand is pretty good. And yeah, I think we'll keep, and hope our opponents cannot destroy the Torpor Orb. But Hushwing Gryff is a nice replacement, so let's scry. Don't need more lands, so we'll put those to the bottom. Fatal Push I think we can keep on top. Even if their opponent did not have a 1-drop, we can probably find a use for it. And Edge of Autumn. Alright, their opponent's not quite on the deck I expected after game 1. So let's just run out this Torpor Orb and see what happens. So their opponent is definitely on a ramp style deck. Not sure what they're ramping into yet. Llanowar Wastes, alright, so perhaps they are playing black for Shaman of the Pack, but Torpor Orb also wants to have a word with Shaman of the Pack. Another Edge of Autumn, so their opponent gets to ramp once again. So they do have a lot of lands in play here. We are just going to play a Fetid Heath, Sego, and then flash in a Hushwing Gryff end of turn as insurance in case they do blow up the Torpor Orb. Gilt Leaf Archdruid. Opponent gets to draw a card when they cast a Druid, and they can tap 7 Druids to gain control of our lands. Alright, that seems fair. So their opponent on a Druid deck rather than an Elf deck. Now the 2-drop makes more sense. So let's flash in this Hushwing Gryff. And Honor Guard is nice, but we're just going to play Dust Elemental end of turn, which can hopefully ambush the Archdruid. Opponent did not see Dust Elemental in game 1, so that's a very real possibility. And then the Vault of the Archangel is going to make it so we're probably not going to get outraced on the ground. Elvish Mystic. Opponent gets to draw a card. Elvish Mystic turns out to be an Elf and a Druid. So we do have Fatal Push to take care of the Mystic, but opponent needs 7 Druids before this becomes a real problem. Alright, our opponent's casting a Chord of Calling here, so we're not going to get to ambush the Archdruid. There's a Chord of Calling for 1, so this says when you cast a Druid spell, so they're not going to get to draw cards. But yeah, I suppose this resolves. A Wild Canter. Alright, does our opponent have some sort of combo here? Journey of Eternity. The opponent would be able to sacrifice a Wild Canter to transform the Journey right away. So I don't think we want to let them have it here. So let's Fatal Push in response. and that way the journey doesn't get to transform because it's never in play. Let's attack for 2. Opponent falls to 15. And then we can play another Temple of Silence and put that on the bottom, since our opponent probably has a swamp. Don't need more lands, would rather find more payoff cards. So we did not get to ambush the Archdruid last turn, maybe we get to ambush it this turn. Hidden Herbalists. Elvish Mystic. Torpor Orb also does a nice job of preventing Reclamation Sage from destroying it. Opponent with 5 druids now, so that's getting pretty scary. And yep, there's Reclamation Sage, which does not get to blow up Torpor Orb, so not the best sideboard card against us. And yep, looks like we do get to ambush the Archdruid, so that's nice. Flash in Dust Elemental, and that's a relief, because the Archdruid could definitely run away with the game. And our opponent's just gonna scoop it up. So next turn we could have attacked for 8 in the air, so that's a 2-turn clock, and back that up with Vault of the Archangel, and our opponent cannot really outrace us. Alright, I wanna thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this gameplay, and as always, have a nice day. Looks like Torpor Orb is gonna claim another victim here. Opponent flashes in Spell Queller, nothing happens, and Dust Elemental comes into play. And our opponent scoops it up. Alright, sweet. So up against the blue-whites, sort of Death and Taxes spirits. How do we want to sideboard? I also want to thank all my patrons for supporting the channel, and you can do so yourself as well over at patreon.com/LegenVD, where you get cool rewards for supporting the channel, as well as getting us closer to our goals, where with every goal reached, we will release an additional weekly series. So if you want to see more content, Patreon is the place to go.